and welcome to Nocturnal Transmissions, the fortnightly podcast that brings you dark tales, both old and new, performed by voice artist Kristin Holland. I believe that children are our future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Whitney Houston. Let's save the children. Marvin Gaye. I want to kill people. I want to rip their stomachs out and eat their children. Mike Tyson. Our featured tale this time around is entitled For the Children. Gentle listener, it is not. We do hope you enjoy Holden Marrs' For the Children. He felt a heat flush his face, cheeks full of blood as he lumbered up the steps of the metal fire escape, a gas can in each hand. His pulse grew erratic as the full realization of what he was there for sank in. He was having an out-of-body experience. But he wasn't hovering over himself. He was hundreds of yards away in the dark, gazing through a telescope at his own feverish body. He came back to his consciousness in a rush and found himself looking through a window at the family within. Son, daughter, mother and infant. Father. They played a game together and enjoyed each other's presence, the room full of familial spirit. Suddenly, his heart grew heavy with regret for what he had to do. He hesitated. He knew he was sick. In the distance, he heard the blades of a police helicopter chopping the brisk city air. Maybe he should turn himself in. They could get him help, get him a doctor. Instantly, he was looking through a window made of time. He saw himself in that room. Just a child, as he looked down the barrel of a loaded revolver. His father's finger on the trigger, his mother's body, bloody and broken, lifeless in the doorway. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe as he watched his father's thumb cock the hammer. His own breath choked him as he heard the clicks of the gun. A scream tore itself from his throat as the chambers rotated, and that hammer fell. And, as abruptly as it started, the memory was gone, replaced with the happy lie he had observed moments before. Sweat covered his being. It soaked into his clothes and plastered his hair to his face. His grip on the gas cans tightened, and in that moment, he knew he couldn't let those kids go through that same betrayal. So on he lumbered, and below him, the city was alive. Ants scurried without purpose beneath incandescent suns, and great mechanized scarabs shuffled about in an endless dance. Their mechanical clicks and whirs and horns clashed with the ants' organic cries, and created a cacophony of energy, a capitalistic orchestra conducted by demons inside translucent monoliths of steel and mirrored glass. As he traversed one of the fire escape's landings, two cries gained clarity above the rest, shouting from the apartment next to him. He paused a moment to listen.
Are you really going to start this shit with the dishes again?
A man shouted.
I just want you to do them for once in your miserable life, Jerry.
A woman roared back.
Well, maybe my life wouldn't be so miserable if I wasn't married to such a stupid, frigid bitch,
he returned.
My mother was right. I should have just married David when I had the chance. Then I wouldn't be stuck in this shithole with you.
In the midst of the yelling, a compulsion gripped him, and though he tried, he could not resist as he gazed into the apartment. As his eyes gravitated between the curtains, he was again transported into memory and saw his parents. His father towered over his mother as she cowered beneath his massive frame.
"What the fuck did you just say to me?"
his father bellowed.
"What did you just say, you stupid bitch?"
His mother tried to answer, but her words were beaten down by the back of his hand. As she hit the floor, he was upon her, yanking her up by her beautiful hair, as she howled in pain.
"You don't ever talk back to me! I'm the best fucking thing you've got, and you know it! Without me, you wouldn't even have this shithole! You'd be out on the goddamn streets! Don't you ever!"
His father's shouting grew ever louder as he struck her over and over and over. Her cries pleading for help, desperately trying to touch the ears of anyone who could listen. His callous fists desecrated her delicate body, reducing her to a quivering, sobbing pile of flesh and bone without value in this civilized world. Outside, his muscles seized, his joints ossified, and he was frozen on the fire escape. The wind cut his eyes as he was forced to watch, while his father destroyed his mother. Her cries became weaker and more infrequent. Eventually they ceased altogether, and he stared, eyes bulging and mouth agape, as his father dropped her lifeless form in the doorway. Suddenly, his father's body tensed. Through a predatory sixth sense, the beast felt the presence of prey. He straightened and turned slowly. Their eyes locked, and his visage twisted with a monstrous rage as he began a slow march towards the window.
"What the fuck are you doing out of your room, Charles?"
his father roared. His face continued its unholy contortions as it pulled colors from the walls and sucked light from the lamps.
"Who the fuck told you that you could leave your room? Huh? Answer me when I'm talking to you!"
His father's voice deepened and warped into a demonic squeal that grated on his very soul. The ants were shrieking beneath his skin, consuming him from the inside, while the scarabs made their way up his body, tilling his flesh with their steely limbs. He shut his eyes and ears as he tried desperately to end it. His heart pounded and left a vacuum in his tightening chest as he fell to his knees. His blood roared deafeningly, and his father's luciferic snarls grew in intensity. They filled his head and battled within its confines, each growing louder and louder and louder and louder until he felt his skull split apart by their feudal volume. The noises cut off with a jarring abruptness, and his eyes snapped open as he collapsed on all fours, his fingers woven through the metal grate in a white-knuckled grip as he frantically sucked in the oxygen his father had deprived him of moments prior. His condition was deteriorating. The memories were becoming too real, becoming far too real. He didn't have much time. He forced himself to his feet and collected the gas cans with trembling hands. He had to keep moving. No more detours. No more windows. The remaining flights passed without incident, and as he ascended the final stairway, his body cried out in protest. His triceps burned with anaerobic fire, his shoulders begged for rest, and his legs and lower back filled with a deadened ache. But the knowledge that it was almost over, that this was his final trip, fueled him. It dulled the ache in his bones and quenched his muscles as he summited the building once more. As he mounted the rooftop and crossed to its center, he looked upon the multitude of spent gas cans that littered the gravel landscape. They looked like tombstones in some post-apocalyptic cemetery. As he navigated this graveyard, he tread lightly, so as not to awaken its inhabitants. He soon came to the end of his journey and stood before a great white metallic vacuole. A sign on its side shouted at him in big, bold block letters, "Caution." But he ignored it, and with practiced hand on the tank and uncapped the spout of one of the gas cans, he mated the two, and as the gasoline flowed and sloshed into its new vessel, his mind drifted to the innocents below, to the lives he was soon to end. No, he was not ending lives, but saving souls. Without him, every single being in this building would be thrown into the muck of modern society, condemned to life. Day by day, they would lose their sanity and everything they loved, helpless before the inevitability of their deterioration, until one day they were but a husk of their former selves. He would spare them those hardships and guide them through this life sentence. He would ferry them to the other side. Feeling the last of the gasoline slip into the tank, he threw the can behind him, now just another headstone, and replaced the cap. Given confidence by the sureness of the goodness of his deed, he smashed the lock that held the cover over the manual flush button. He flipped the cover up and placed his hand above the button. Tears of ambivalence welled in his eyes, but an image of the children in the apartment downstairs, those precious, innocent children, flashed through his mind. With a howl, he plunged down his hand and soon heard the bleat of the fire alarm as cries of confusion wafted on miasmic fumes. Tears stained his face as he wrenched open the last can of gasoline and held it above his head. The noxious liquid showered his body, invaded his nostrils with a searing agony, and sank into his skin through a hellish osmosis. As the last of the gasoline trickled down, he dropped the can to his feet, and with shaking hands pulled from his coat 2 items: a prepaid disposable phone and a silver Zippo. Gas seeped into his eyes and blinded him as his fingers fumbled across the keypad. He managed to punch in the right numbers, and immediately an explosion rocked the building. The first floor was engulfed in a cleansing fireball, followed quickly by the second and the third. He could hear the cries of confusion turn to cries of agony, and they tore into his heart. But he knew what he was doing was right. It was for the best. It was for them. As the blaze below leapt from floor to floor, he turned his attention to the lighter. A quick flick of the wrist, and it was open, ready for him to strike the flint and summon its unwavering flame. He took a moment's pause, prayed to a god he no longer believed in. Then down snapped his thumb, and up came that invincible pilot light. With an unholy swiftness, the fire spread across his body and engulfed him in a pain known only by the damned. Every single nerve in his body sizzled, popped, and shrieked at his sudden betrayal. He felt his skin and his clothes melt together, melding in an excruciating matrimony that brought him to his knees. Then, with a colossal roar and titanic groans, the building opened up beneath him and swallowed him into its gaping maw. For the Children by Holden Marrs. If you'd like to find out more about this author, please visit our website, NOCTURNALTRANSMISSIONS.com.au, where you'll find information on all the authors we feature here on the podcast, and links to their work. A big thank you to Edith Clare for bringing this story to our attention. We do so appreciate your suggestions, lovely listeners. If you have a favorite tale you'd like to hear on the podcast, please don't keep your light under a bushel. You can contact us through our aforementioned website, Instagram, or Facebook. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, Edith. You know, there's only 13 sleeps to go until we sign off on another year of unpleasantness. We do hope you've enjoyed taking another trip around the great ball of fire in the sky with us. Our final offering for 2018 will drop on Christmas Eve. Until then, as always, watch the skies, fear the dark, and don't trust anyone, especially yourself. All non-public domain stories are featured with the permission of the authors. All voices and production are concocted by Kristin Holland. Good night, gentle listener.